Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. I will be talking to you about the value of rehabilitation, monitoring 65 years of Veld recovery at Weenen Nature Reserve from 1948 to 2013. I'll be looking at the long-term recovery of a rangeland that was severely degraded in the past, following the implementation of an extensive rehabilitation program. Just to kick off, I'd like to give you some background about the study area. Weenen Nature Reserve is situated on land formerly known as the Onverwag Farm, which was previously used as a labor tenant farm, and it had been subjected to severe veld mismanagement. And the mismanagement involved severe overstocking with livestock, which included cattle, goats, sheep, horses, as well as donkeys. But there was also inappropriate cultivation as well as overpopulation by humans. So it was a combination of these factors that led to severe degradation of this farm. And realizing this severe land degradation, the state then expropriated the land and initiated extensive rehabilitation program since 1948. After the commencement of this rehabilitation, the Department of Agriculture, which implemented rehabilitation, had to make a decision regarding the best form of management for this land. And they reached a consensus that conservation management will be the best form of management that will actually make sure that this land doesn't revert to its previous state of degradation. And in April 1975, the farm was proclaimed Weenen Nature Reserve and handed over to the former Natal Parks Board to manage. And in 1979, the University of Natal students, led by Professor Neil Tentin, started monitoring the veld condition on 16 original rehabilitation sites, which were later increased to 20 sites. They did their second survey in 1985. Unfortunately, that was also their last survey. And for quite some time, there was no monitoring until 1997, when the Department of Agriculture staff, based at Sidara and led by Dr. Carlson Camp, resumed the survey. And they carried on monitoring these areas until 1999. Unfortunately, they also stopped the survey in 1999. And there was also no monitoring until 2008, when we at Ezemvelo took over the monitoring again. And we've been monitoring since then at a 5-yearly interval. So I will be reporting here on the results of veld condition monitoring after 65 years since the inception of the rehabilitation. And the aim of the study was to determine how successful the rehabilitation at Weenen was 65 years later. Is there a pointer here?
Should be one. Is that one working?
I'm not sure. Yeah. That's the study area located within the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands. It's just less than 5,000 hectares in extent. These are the images we show you. I thought I should just give you a glimpse here of how this area looked like around 1950s. You can see here, if you look at the images, this area was actually severely degraded. Erosion was quite active, and the area was denuded of vegetation. Erosion sometimes went as actually far as the subsoil being exposed, and sometimes in some cases even bedrock was exposed. If you look at the bottom image here, you can see there is the stone pack supposed to actually trap the soil here, slow down the water flow. And at the top, the earth dams, and these are stone walls. All these structures were meant to actually trap or slow down the water flow, and then actually have the soil deposited behind these structures, which will eventually allow the vegetation to re-establish and stabilize the area. This image shows you reclamation work in progress in 1980 you can see men at work here constructing the stone wall. Fast forwarding 65 years later, this is a site that we actually monitored, one of the sites we monitored in 2013. And you can see that there has been impressive recovery here with herbaceous layer looking really healthy. And you can see the Thymida and the rooigrass in high abundance here, which is quite an impressive recovery compared to the images that I've just shown you in the previous slides. I thought I would actually share with you this rainfall history of Weenen from 1982 to 2016. This is the wet season rainfall, which shows you which is from October to March. And it shows you the rainfall deviations from the mean. But I would like to draw your attention to the past 7 years of rainfall. And you will see here that in 5 of those 7 years, rainfall, Weenen experienced far below average rainfall, with 2012 and 2014 being the most severe here, with deviations as high as 256 millimeters. And this has implications for the regeneration of herbaceous layer, as well as bush encroachment, which we view now as a new threat to the herbaceous vegetation in Weenen, as well as fire management. The bush encroachment, of course, is a threat because it does actually reduce the herbaceous layer as well as species composition, which also have impact on other ecological processes, such as fire. The methods, we surveyed about 20 30 by 30 meter plots using a modified wheel point technique to sample herbaceous species composition. And we sampled 200 points in each 30 by 30 meter plots. The benchmark method was used to analyze fell condition, and the tree density was estimated by counting the number of trees per height class per 30 by 30 meter plots. And we had 5 height classes ranging from less than half a meter to greater than 2 meters. These are the results for fell condition, and we split these results between the sites that are situated on Dolerite derived soils, as well as the sites that are situated on shale derived soils. What you can see here is that the Dolerite derived soils actually had an impressive improvement here. Although there are fluctuations, but in general, most of the sites have got their fell condition scores above 80%, with a few sites having their scores around 60 and just above 70%, which is quite good, as we saw the herbaceous layer looking healthy. But if we look at the shale situated sites, the picture is quite different. As you can see, most of the sites have got their fell condition ranging from 10 up to about 40%, with just one site which was sitting just above 70% in 1979, but it also was on a downward trajectory. So there hasn't been much improvement on these sites. The reason being there was a very severe loss of soil on these sites, to such an extent that the subsoil was actually exposed, in some cases even the bedrock. So there's not much for herbaceous vegetation to actually establish here. So it's going to be like this for quite a long time. In this graph, I'm just showing you the trends between the decreasers and increaser species, which are your palatable and unpalatable species. Again, split between the Dolerite soils and the shale soils. This is the Dolerite, as you can see here. We can see that the decreaser species, your palatables, the green bars, have been consistently so stable across the time periods, or the survey time periods, with the unpalatable species being quite low, which is a good sign of a veld that is not in bad condition. But if you look at the trends on the shale-derived soils, you can see we're looking at a different or direct opposite of what we've seen in the Dolerite sites. Your palatable species are in low abundance compared to the unpalatables, which is not a good sign. Here, I'm exploring here the relationship between the fell condition and your decreaser species, your palatable species, which shows that if your rangeland is actually having its herbaceous species composition dominated by the palatable species, it's a good indication of a veld that is actually in good condition, hence the positive relationship between your veld condition scores on the y-axis and your palatables on the x-axis. If you look at the relationship between your unpalatables and your veld condition scores, you can see here it shows that if your rangeland is actually having its herbaceous species composition dominated by the unpalatables, it's an indication of a veld that is in poor condition. Therefore, you can see this inverse relationship between your veld condition scores and the unpalatable species. I looked here at the tree density, combined tree density by height class. We grouped all the trees by height class regardless of species. And if you look at the smaller height classes in 1979, they were quite lower in abundance. But if you move to 1998, you can see a substantial increase here, which could perhaps mean an encroachment or perhaps an invasion, if I call it that. If you move on to 2008, the less than half a meter sort of height class did go down a bit, which might be due to maybe the fire impact as well as the browsing impact, because these are actually within the fire trap. So there will be those dynamics due to fire, with some of them dying because of fire and others actually recruiting. Those that survive will have recruited into the next height class. As you can see there, the height class between half a meter and 1 meter actually increased. So there were some that would have recruited to the next height class. But then if you look at the taller height class, the tallest, the greater than 2 meter height class, you can see that this height class had been actually consistent or constant throughout the time periods, which could be understandable because these trees are sort of out of harm's way as far as the fire impact is concerned, but also not too much browsing pressure on them, perhaps except for the giraffe that might be actually reaching that height. So it does make sense that the smaller height classes are fluctuating because of the fire impact and browsing impact on them. Now we're looking at the tree density by species here. In other words, we're trying to see which of these species actually made up the tree density that we actually saw on the previous slides. We can see here Vachela karoo, Acacia karoo, those who are still using the old name, is responsible for most of that tree abundance, followed by Vachela kefra. But if you look at Vachela karoo, it seems to have been on a downward trend. I'm not sure why it had been decreasing since then, but it shows that downward trend. And you look at Vachela kefra, that one seems to have been increasing consistently throughout these time periods. The third one is Vitex remania, and you can see also Vachela nilotica. But there are also newcomers that we see here, which you haven't recorded previously. These are broadleaf species, the Sestria remaniana, Grevia hispida, Sestria candidans, which are probably just the normal ecological succession following the pioneer species, such as the Vachelas. In conclusion, I think that these monitoring results clearly show that the value of rehabilitation in what was achieved at Weenen Nature Reserve, particularly in Dolerite areas. The results also show that the soil type and degree of degradation has an effect on the level and rate of veld recovery. This can be seen clearly in the shale areas where success was minimal, since the active soil erosion is still occurring and recovery is slow. This is because some of these areas had been eroded down to bedrock, nor subsoil. All in all, the overall recovery that we observe at Weenen accentuates the value of rehabilitation of degraded rangelands, despite the cost that may be involved in these exercises. I would like to thank the following people and institutions for their contribution to this work. Thank you.